if it was you, and I was like,
Hey, how are you guys?
good. Yeah. It just so happened to be you. I was like, yeah. I started laughing too. I was like, you got some coffee?
Thank you.
Where's your brother? Sleepy, you didn't get him up? Yeah, we're close.
Welcome and good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you guys, and thanks for coming to worship with us today. We just have a couple quick announcements, and then we'll start our worship service. Next Sunday is our it's Thursday on here. I'm glad I didn't read it. Third Sunday lunch, and what that is just gives you an opportunity to kind of learn about us, what we've got going on, and ask some questions about, hey, I heard about groups, what is that? And just, give you a chance to talk to us some more and for us to give you some more details about what's going on here. So, say a quick prayer and we'll start our worship service. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity to come and worship you. In your word, it says that without your love, we would be consumed. And I just pray today that during this worship service, that you would just consume us with your love. That you are invited and welcome here, and I just pray that your presence would be known. And I just pray that you would be with those leading the service, that you would just speak through them and work through them, Lord. And help us just to leave all of our distractions, all of our burdens, just leave all of that at your feet today, and just help us experience your love and your comfort. Thank you again so much for this amazing opportunity to connect with you. These things I pray in your precious holy name. Amen.
What's up, everybody? Go ahead and stand with us, and we're going to start worship. I wanted to start off just with the scripture from Psalm 51. It says, "Unseal my lips, O Lord, that my mouth may praise you. You do not desire a sacrifice, or I would offer one. You don't want a burnt offering. The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit, and you will not reject a broken and repentant heart." So let's sing.
However you want.
atmosphere. We know you are here. Heaven has come to earth. Rebuild and restore. Release miracles. Heaven has come to earth. Sing it again. Faith fills the atmosphere. We know you are here. Heaven has come to earth. Rebuild and restore. Release miracles. Heaven has come to earth. One more time. Faith fills the atmosphere. We know you are here. Heaven has come to earth. Rebuild and restore. Release miracles. Heaven has come to earth. Like a fire, like a flood. Come however you want, however you want, with your power, with your love. Come however you want, however you want. I don't wanna be afraid every time I face away. I don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna fear the storm just because I hear it roar. I don't wanna fear the storm. I don't wanna fear the storm. Sing it. Wanna be afraid every time I face a waves. I don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna fear the storm just because I hear it roar. I don't wanna fear the storm. I don't wanna fear the storm. Peace, be still. Say the word and I will set my feet upon the up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. It's our prayer tonight. Let faith rise up. Oh heart, believe, let faith rise up in me. Let faith rise up. Oh heart, believe, let faith rise up in me. Sing it again, sing. Let faith rise up. Oh heart, believe, let faith rise up in me. Let faith rise up. Oh heart, believe, let faith rise up in me. Your peace be still. Sing the word and I will set my feet upon the sea. Till I'm dancing in the deep. Peace be still. My king, so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. Let's pray. Father, we thank you, God, that you speak peace over us. When we get overwhelmed, you speak life into us. When we get discouraged, you speak love into us when we don't feel like we belong. And God, you're always there to lift us up and just shower us with your love. And so, God, we just thank you for who you are. Father, we thank you for the way that you come, God, the way that you move. And we just pray that you move our hearts now through your word. And just help us to retain and be obedient to what you have to say to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, you guys can have a seat. I'm glad you're here this morning. For some of you, I know this is your first time or this is your second time here. And so we're glad that you are here with us. So last Sunday was Launch Sunday, Easter Sunday. We kind of kicked our church off. And so this is the week after that. So this is still very new and very fresh for all of us. And so I just want to tell you, just feel free to relax. If you need to go to the bathrooms are back there. Feel free to walk back there. If you get thirsty and you want some coffee, feel free to grab some coffee. Or if you like, I need to go check on my kids, you can go check on your kids. We're pretty casual around here, so feel free to do that. So last week we started a new sermon series called A New Story, and it's all about the story of Jesus and about our story. And if we find our story within the story of Jesus, then life begins to make sense. And we talked about how there are different elements that make up a story, and without the different elements of the story, there is actually no story. And so last week we talked about the save the cat moment that happens within a story. It was this moment when we meet the character in the story and we decide whether we like that character, whether that's a good character, whether that's someone worth following. And so we talked about, it was Easter, so we talked about the death and the resurrection of Jesus, and we said, if Jesus wasn't a person worth following throughout his life, then he's actually not a person worth following through eternity. And so we looked at the story of Lazarus and how Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. But in that moment, he met Mary and Martha there, and he said, hey, take me to that place of pain and hurt in your life, and let's go there. And so there's that moment within a story. And then today we're going to look at another element of story called the inciting incident. Okay? And I want to give you a definition of what the inciting incident is. The inciting incident is an episode, a plot point. It is an event that hooks the reader into the story. So it's very early in the story. Usually within the first third of a movie or a book, you're going to have an inciting incident. And it is a particular moment is when an event thrusts the protagonist, that's the hero of the story, into the main action of the story. It's the event that gets the story into motion. It gets things going. And so in every story there is a point, there is something in that story that pushes the protagonist, the hero of the story, into action. And without that, the hero won't ever go anywhere, right? They'll never face any conflict. Remember last week I used the illustration of Rocky Balboa, right? And when we meet Rocky, he's just this everyday kind of guy. He's a boxer, he's a fighter, and we kind of relate to him as an everyday guy. And there's this scene where Rocky's taking care of the turtles, and so you're like, all right, I like this guy, right? He's the guy I'm pulling for, right? But that's not a very good story, right? Rocky Balboa takes care of turtles, right? That's not a great story, okay? And so there has to be an event within that story that pushes Rocky into the Rocky Balboa that we know that he becomes, okay? And without something to push Rocky out of his comfort zone, he's just going to stay Rocky, the local boxer who takes care of turtles, okay? And so what happens is Rocky doesn't actually have a lot of control over this. And many times for us, we don't have a lot of control over inciting incidents within our lives. But for Rocky, what happens is there's this guy called Apollo Creed. And Apollo Creed is the heavyweight champion of the world, right? He's the biggest name in boxing. And so he is supposed to host this event that happens in Boston. And he's supposed to fight for the title. But his competitor drops out of the race. And if you know anything about boxing, like the prize money is millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so if he doesn't have a fighter, then all that money just gets left on the table and he has to walk away. So Apollo Creed comes up with this great marketing scheme. He says, the fight's in Boston, right? Let's not throw it off. What we got to do is we got to give a local, no-name guy a chance at the heavyweight champion of the world. Right? And he's like, that'll sell tickets. People will go to that. Some nobody who is here from town, they're going to go to see if their local guy can beat the heavyweight champion of the world. Right? And so for Apollo Creed, that's not really a big challenge, right? He's the best in the world, and Rocky's a no-name guy. But for Rocky, this is his opportunity, right? This is the thing that propels him into the Rocky Balboa that he becomes. Without this, he just stays the, little local Rocky, right? And so he has a choice to make. There's a huge risk on the other side of this. If he says yes to this, well, the odds are he's going to get his face pummeled, right? Right? He's going to get beat up. Okay? But if he says no to this, well, then his life doesn't change at all. And so an inciting incident is something that happens, and when it happens, there's usually a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of challenge that's ahead of them. But if they don't face it, then things are not going to change. And if they do face it, then everything moving forward is going to look different. Okay, so think about, an inciting incident is a point of no return. Okay, so it's when Alice falls down the rabbit hole. Can't come back from that. It's when Dorothy goes up in the tornado. Right, you can't come back from that. It's when Morpheus takes the blue pill. Okay, there's no turning back. It's in The Hobbit where the wizard Gandalf, he shows up with Bilbo, and Bilbo's never left the Shire before. He's in this nice, safe place, right? And the wizard invites him on this adventure. And if he says yes to this adventure, then his life's never going to be the same again, right? And in The Lord of the Rings, it's when Sam and Frodo, they find that magical ring that makes them invisible, right? This is kind of, life can never be the same after this. This is what an inciting incident does. It pushes us forward. And if you've ever been cliff jumping, I mean, you guys like being cliff jumping. You jump off a high rock into deep water, right? You ever done that? Okay. So with cliff diving, if you're like me, you don't really like heights, you don't really like deep water, and so that's the combination of those things. And so, a lot of times you'll stand on the edge of the rock and you'll look over and you'll kind of be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. Right? This seems like a bad idea. Right? It might even be beautiful out there. It might be a nice scene, but I'm not doing that. But then your friend comes up and stands beside you, and they're like, if you go, I'll go. Right? And you're like, I don't know, man. I don't know about that. And they're like, you're a chicken, aren't you? And you're like, all right, now I gotta go, right? See? And so there's that moment that pushes you off the edge. And so with any inciting incident, on the other side of it, there's fear, and there's risk, and there's the unknown, and there's a chance that there's somebody that's going to say no. And so this is true in our own lives, that there are events that push us over the edge, that push us past our comfort zone. And so if you want to go to college, the inciting incident might be filling out the application Because once you fill that application out and you put it in someone else's hands, it's out of your control. They're either going to say yes or they're going to say no, right? When you apply for that job, they're either going to say yes or they're going to say no, right? When you get pregnant, right, that is a point of no return, okay? There's no coming back from that, right? Life has changed forever. Or when you ask that guy or girl to marry you, you know, on the other side of that, they're either going to say yes or they're going to say no. Okay? And so if you're not willing to go through that, well then life just kind of stays the same. But if you say yes, things can forever change one way, or you face the possibility of rejection. And so this is true in our story, and this is true in all stories. That without an inciting incident, there is no story. And so this is true in our lives. This is true in the story of Jesus. When we look at this story, that when Jesus calls us to something more, that's an inciting incident. Right? When Jesus says, hey, I'm calling you to do this, if we say yes to that thing, then forever change, okay? And so a lot of times you say, the first time you say yes to Jesus, that you say, okay, now I'm a Christian, okay? That's an inciting incident because you're saying, I follow Jesus. And so if I say yes to Jesus, everything else is different than it was before. I can't go back to the way I was. And what you find that is, the further along in the journey you follow Jesus, you go, okay, that was just one step. Okay? And then you're like, okay, I'm now wading into deeper waters, and Jesus is calling me to something more. Yeah. And then you take that step and you find out that Jesus is calling me to something more. And the challenge is always there, but it is a good pursuit that you'll find, but it will take risk. You guys know that old hymn, I've decided to follow Jesus? Mm-hmm. Right? They say that line, and the chorus says that line 3 times. I've decided to follow Jesus. I've decided to follow Jesus. I've decided to follow Jesus. What's the last line? No turning back, right? And so there is this sense that when we follow Jesus, that when we say yes to the call of Jesus, that is an inciting incident. There's a point of no return that goes there, that all of our decisions going forward look differently because we made a decision to follow Jesus in that moment. And so today we're looking at Matthew chapter 14. You can turn there in your Bibles if you want to. The scripture will be on the screen. I'll be reading from the New Living Translation. We're going to start in verse 22, and we're going to cover this passage that is a classic passage. And if you paid attention to the last song we just sang, you might have figured it out. It is the passage of Jesus and Peter walking on the water. Okay, and so there's this book that I read the whole book is about this one passage. And it's by John Ortberg. It's a great book. A lot of the points that I go over today are actually taken straight from that book. And the title captures this idea of an inciting incident really well. The title is this, is that if you want to walk on water, you have to get out of the boat. Okay? And so we're going to look at that today starting in verse 22. It says, immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back in the boat and cross to the other side of the lake while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water, as Jesus does. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost." So here Jesus is. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a storm. There's wind. There's waves. Things seem to be getting out of control for the disciples. And someone comes walking on the water toward them, and the disciples, they don't recognize who it is, right? And you're like, really? Like, who else is it going to be? Right? You guys know Jesus. You know what he's capable of. They just left, what they're sailing away from is Jesus feeding the 5,000. And so Jesus goes off by himself to pray to get some rest. And they're sailing across the sea here. And so what they're doing is they're sailing across to kind of get away from the crowds. Jesus is actually going, they're not moving that fast because Jesus is going to walk around the shore and meet them. That's kind of the plan. The plan is to kind of get them away from those crowds for a minute. Okay, and so they've just seen Jesus feed 5,000 people, and yet it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and the wind and the waves come, and somebody comes walking on the water, and they don't know who it is. They don't recognize Jesus. And that's true for us, is sometimes when it's 3 a.m. and something's really wrong in our life, and something's really going bad, and Jesus shows up in that moment, a lot of times we don't recognize him. We don't see him there. But it's in those moments that Jesus is going to do something extraordinary if we're paying attention. Right? But a lot of times if it's 3 a.m., you're going to miss him if you're not looking for him. In Mark's version of this story, he uses an interesting phrase. He says that Jesus intended to pass them by. Right? So they're walking on the water. Jesus is like, you know what? I'm not going to go all the way around the shoreline, right? You know, I get it's 3 a.m. There's wind and there's rain and stuff. But you know what? I'll just take a little trip across the lake instead, right? And so Jesus is taking across the lake, and it says that he intended to pass them by. And so for Mark's early readers, remember, this wasn't written necessarily to me and you directly. It was written to a first century Jewish audience. They would have read the phrase, he intended to pass them by, and that would have taken them back to some Old Testament text. Okay? They would have thought of Moses. There's a story about Moses. He hides in the cleft of a rock, and God passes him by. Okay? And there's a story of Elijah who he stands on top of a mountain, and God passes them by. And so Mark is trying to tell his readers something, right? Is that there's a pattern here. That God is trying to get their attention in the midst of the storm. Okay? There's a burning bush, right? There's wind and fire. There is Jesus who is walking on the water. And in the midst of that storm, he's trying to get their attention. But they're afraid. And the reality is that is scary, right? And in the midst of our storm, it is scary. That's just part of it. But when we say yes to God, we actually get to see God in ways that we've never seen God before. We get to experience His power. We talk about the glory of God, right? Moses saw the glory of God. Elijah saw the glory of God. They saw the glory of God when Peter walks across the water. So they see God do things in ways that they've never seen Him do it before. Verse 27, but Jesus spoke to them at once. He says, don't be afraid. He said, take courage. I am here, right? You can trust me. You know me. You've seen my character. You've seen my capabilities. You know who I am. And so take courage. Verse 28, then Peter called him, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water. Do you hear Peter? Peter's kind of an idiot sometimes. I'm going to be honest with you. Right? He doesn't have it all together. Sometimes Peter says stuff that Peter cannot back up. Okay? And so Peter says, Jesus, Lord, if that's you, tell me it's you by telling me to come walking on the water. He's like, you're walking on the water? Jesus, that looks like fun. Why don't I walk on the water? You ever wonder, like, if Peter's really excited to see Jesus, why doesn't he just jump off the boat and swim to Jesus? Right? He's got the world's best lifeguard right there on hand. Right? He's going to be okay. But the reason he says, Jesus, tell me to come to you walking on the water, is because this story is not just about risk-taking, but it's not just about extreme swimming, right? It isn't about an adventure that God is calling you to an adventure, to something greater, but it's not just an adventure for the sake of adventure. It's an adventure in obedience. And so we look at that, and sometimes we can confuse, it's really easy to confuse the authentic call of God in our life and what He's actually called us to do, and this thing of adventure, this impulse that we have that we just want to do something great. Right? I remember when I was in college, I lived in Louisiana at the time, in a little town called Ruston, Louisiana. I went to Louisiana Tech University, just small town, Louisiana. Not very exciting. Okay? And so I decided that one summer I was going to go work summer camps in North Carolina, near Black Mountain, near Asheville, North Carolina. So it was up in the mountains, and for me, that was a grand adventure because I came from Louisiana, and Louisiana is known for like swamps, right? So it is a flat place, right? So we got excited every time we saw a speed bump, you know? And so to go to North Carolina was this grand adventure, and I worked at a summer camp, and it was one of the first times I really experienced what true Christian community looked like, and there was this group of people that we were all together, and for me there was actually a lot of healing that took place during that time, and we were kind of this group that was kind of all sharing our lives together and centered on the person of Jesus and heading in the same direction, working toward the same end. And so it was great, but then the summer was over, and I had to go back home to Ruston, Louisiana, which was not that exciting. And I felt like God was calling me to do some stuff there. And for me, that actually took a lot more courage to follow Jesus in that place than it did when I was out on this big adventure. And so the adventure is an adventure in obedience, right? And courage is an important part of it. It takes courage, but with courage, there needs to be wisdom and discernment. And walking on water is not something that Peter's just going to do for recreational purposes. Okay, he's doing it for something more. And so Peter calls out, he says, Lord, if that's really you, tell me it's you by telling me to come walking on the water. And Jesus says what? Verse 29. He says, yes, come, Jesus said. Right? So you got to imagine that they're in the boat and Jesus is kind of a little ways off and they're yelling back and forth to each other. He says, yes, come. And they can't really see Jesus' face all that well, but I got to imagine he's got a little smile on his face right now. Right? But for him, he's saying, there's somebody in the boat and they get it, right? Right? They want to walk on the water. They understand what it means to share in this adventure with me. And it says, so Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. So you got to think, Peter gets up and he looks around and there's wind and there's rain and there's waves and there's probably the possibility of death. And he looks at Jesus and he says, you know what, I think I'll risk it. And what you got to understand for Peter is a fisherman. Right? For Peter, the safest place he can imagine is in a boat. Yeah. Before he's a disciple, he's a fisherman. So he grew up in boats and out of water. And this isn't his first storm that he's been through. This isn't the first night that he spent in the boat and woke up the next morning in the same place. For Peter, that is his comfort zone. It is safe, it is secure, it is comfortable, right? But there's one thing that Peter knows, that if he stays in the boat, he's not going to walk on the water. Right? So what was John Ortberg's book title? If you want to walk on the water, you got to get out of the boat. And so there's something within all of us that wants to walk on the water. That wants to be a part of that obedient adventure with Jesus. That there's something more that we're working toward. We all want to be part of it, but it would mean leaving something that is comfortable, something that is routine, something that feels safe. And so there's a boat, and you should ask yourself today, what's my boat? Right? What's the thing that I'm holding on to? What's the thing that I trust when it gets a little stormy outside, when life gets a little chaotic? What is the thing that seems easier? What's the easier way out? Like, there's a challenge in front of me. I think God is calling me to do something more, but it would be easier just to do this, just to stay where I am, right? What is the thing that you fear most of leaving behind? You know, for some of us it's a relationship. For some of us it's something we do in secrecy that we don't want anybody to know about. For some of us it's success. You know, I told the launch team 3 or 4 weeks ago about this story about for me and Molly, really it was this pursuit of money, and that if we were going to follow Jesus the way that we were supposed to follow Jesus, then we kind of had to give up on the pursuit of making a lot of money. And so ask yourself, what is your boat? Right? And then have the courage to do what Peter says. He looks at Jesus and says, Jesus, Lord, if that's you, tell me it's you by telling me to come and walk on the water. And Jesus says, yes, come. You want to see the power of God? You want to experience what Moses experienced? You want to experience what Elijah experienced? You want to experience what Peter experienced? Then yes, come. And so you got to think, Peter is standing there. Jesus tells him that, right? And so he is incited the incident himself, right? He said, Jesus, if that's you, tell me to come. And Jesus says, yes, okay? And so he's been accepted into Jesus' kingdom, into a water-walking adventure, but there's still a point where Peter is safely in the boat. And you got to think, he's got to take one step out, and he's got to put it down on the water. I got to imagine he probably, shakes his head. Yeah, that's good. Right? And then he takes his other foot out and he puts that on the water. And at some point, he's got to let go of the boat. Right? He's got to abandon what feels comfortable. He's got to walk on the water. And to do that, he's got to leave the boat behind. And so today, I want you to ask yourself, we got some next steps. We always have next steps because I don't want you to leave here without thinking of how does this apply to my life right now. And just ask yourself, what's something I need to leave behind? What is comfortable? What is the thing that I fear maybe will change forever if I say yes to Jesus? And maybe it's your first time saying yes to Jesus, and that's going to change a lot of stuff for you. Okay? And maybe it's your 100th time where you're like, Jesus, what's the next adventure in obedience that you're calling me to? How do I say yes to that? And then the second thing I want to invite you to do is just get out of the boat. Okay? For some of you, just coming here this morning was an inciting incident. Right? For some of you, the first yes you had to say today was, I need to get out of the boat, which was just my bed this morning, right? Because it felt really good because it was cold outside. And so for me to say yes to get out of the bed was to say yes to Jesus. And now Jesus has got you here, and Jesus wants you to say yes to something else. And so for some of you today, the yes to Jesus may be, hey, I need to follow Jesus for the first time. For some of you today, the yes to Jesus may be, hey, I need to be part of this thing right here. That there's a group of people here whose lives are centered on the person of Jesus, and they're walking together. And the scary thing is that if I stay in that comfortable boat that I've been in, that I will feel safe. And if I get out of the boat, then I'm in the water and I'm going to be exposed. Okay? And so it may not be easy, but it's going to be good. And so I want to invite you to do that. And some people, sometimes they ask me, what does it look like to become a Christian? What does it mean to become a Christian? What is that moment? Right? Usually there's a little prayer involved, but it's the moment that you start making decisions differently because you follow Jesus. We say, Jesus, if that's you, tell me to come walking on the water. He says, yes, come. And you get out of the boat. That's the moment. Look at verse 30. It says, but he, this is Peter, when he saw the strong wind and waves, he was terrified and began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. You of so little faith, Jesus said, why did you doubt me? So Peter gets out of the boat, okay? And he starts walking on the water, and things are great for a little bit, okay? And his eyes are on Jesus, but then he starts looking around and he realizes, oh, there's still wind, and there's still rain, and there's still a storm, and this water is really deep. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, walking with Jesus on the water is not a safe place necessarily. Right? Jesus, if you keep your eyes on Jesus, you can walk with Jesus on the water, you can walk through your problems, but it's not necessarily a safe place. What Peter is realizing for the first time is I'm following Jesus, and that thing that I thought was keeping me safe and comfortable the whole time, I can't fall back into that anymore. It's not there anymore. Okay? So walking on the water with Jesus is not necessarily safe, but it's good. Okay? You got to understand, everything is risky. Staying in the boat is risky. Right? And that fear that you have to overcome, that's the price of growth, that's going to be there. Right? But if you stay in the boat, you'll still face the wind and the rain. Right? The boat is just a false sense of security. You can go through your whole life pretending that things are okay in the boat. The reality is that life will get hard enough at some point that the boat's not going to keep you safe anymore. And the only place that's going to keep you safe is walking on the water with Jesus. The boat is just keeping your head above the water. Walking with Jesus is walking with the one who controls the wind and the waves and is there with you in the hard times when you can't see through anything. And you can stay in the boat, but you're never going to walk on the water. You're never going to truly follow Jesus in the way that you want to follow Jesus. And you'll never see the power of God at work in your life in the way that it can be at work in your life when you're willing to say, I'm going to leave the boat behind. I'm going to be a little vulnerable. I'm going to be exposed out there, but I'm going to be walking with Jesus. And so Peter, he says this thing that I'm inviting you to say today is he says, Jesus, tell me to follow you walking on the water. And Jesus says, yes, come. Let's pray together. Dear God, we just thank you for your son Jesus. We thank you that he came, that he lived a life that is worth imitating, that is worth following, that he died in death and rose again in ways that we need to die to ourselves, and we need to be resurrected in your son. Jesus, if you're calling us today, and I know you are, that behind. That we take steps of faith and we walk on the water and we just see what you can do in and through us in a life where we follow you and we're obedient to you. We love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
If you guys would just stand with us as we continue worshiping this morning. When the ground beneath my feet gives way and I hear the sound of crashing waves and all my world is washing out to sea, I'm hidden safe in the God who never moves, holding fast to the promise of the truth that you are holding tighter still to me. Sing that again. When the ground beneath my feet gives way and I hear the sound of crashing waves and all my world is washing out to sea, I'm hidden safe in the God who never moves, holding fast to the promise of the truth that you are holding tighter still to me. Ooh, the rock won't move and his word is strong. The rock won't move and his love can't be undone. The rock won't move and his word is strong. The rock won't move and his love can't be undone. The rock of our salvation. My hope is in the promise of your blood, my support within the raging flood. Even in the tempest I can see, I'm hidden safe in the God who never moves, holding fast to the promise of the truth that you are holding tighter still to me. The rock won't move and his word is strong. The rock won't move and his love can't be undone. No, it can't. Oh, the rock won't move and his word is strong. The rock won't move and his love can't be undone. Sing, the rock won't move. Oh, the rock won't move and his word is strong. The rock won't move and his love can't be undone. The rock won't move and his word is strong. The rock won't move and his love can't be undone. Oh, the rock of our salvation. Oh, 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 the rock of our salvation. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. The rock won't move. No, the rock won't move. And when darkness seems to hide his face, I rest on his unchanging grace. The rock won't move. No, the rock won't move. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. The rock won't move. No, the rock won't move. And when darkness seems to hide his face, I rest on his unchanging grace. The rock won't move. No, the rock won't move. And on Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All underground is sinking sand. The rock won't move. No, the rock won't His word is strong. The rock won't move and His love can't be undone. Oh, the rock of our salvation. Oh, 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 the rock of our salvation. Found in your name the power to save, with only a whisper, mountain shake. Jesus, our hope and strength. 'Cause you made a way, you unlock these chains. Here in your presence, strongholds break. Freed by the love you gave. 'Cause we give you the highest praise. You deserve it all. You deserve it all. We give you the highest praise. 'Cause you deserve it all. You deserve it all. They're on true, merciful King, broken and shaken. we just reflect on how you really do deserve all the praise, how you really do deserve all the glory, God, that we can literally take none of that. God, for everything that we've gone through in our life and how we are here today, God, you deserve the glory for that. God, we just thank you. We just thank you for who you are. And as we continue this morning of a time of giving, God, that we would just give out of a heart of abundance and joy and love, sacrifice, God, to you. God, we just love you and we thank you.
first time, I want to say a special just thank you for being here today. If you walked in a few minutes late, that's probably okay, because last week we had a service at 11 o'clock, and so this week we did it at 10:30. We tried to get that word out on social media and stuff, but you're always going to miss a few people. Luckily, I don't think we had anybody show up at 9 o'clock, so that's good. So we're glad you're here. And if this is your first or second time, hang out for a little bit. I know that sometimes coming to church for the first time, if it's a new place, there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to figure out, kind of like, how does this work around here? Maybe the songs we sing, you don't know those songs. I don't listen to a lot of Christian music, so I don't know those songs. That sounds bad as a pastor does. But sure. Y'all wouldn't like me if I did. And so hang out for a minute and talk with us. We'd love to hang out with you some more. So spend some time just hanging out afterwards. There's no sacred space here. Like, you can go anywhere. And then next week is we're starting third Sunday lunches. And so what that means is that we'll provide lunch, and after the service is over, give it 10, 15 minutes, we'll set some tables out with some food on them, and you can hang out and get to know some people better, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, because you probably have questions, because I would have questions, and so we want to give you the opportunity to ask those questions. That's next week, next Sunday, so just come hungry. And then if you want to be part of table groups, go grab a card or talk to one of us about what it means to be part of a table group. These are these groups that meet during the week, and so we have a group that meets on Tuesday night in Duncan, and a group that meets on Wednesday night here. We do groups a little different. We incorporate just some time for people to belong and to hang out, and then we do the Bible study and the prayer and all that kind of stuff you would associate with groups. And then our groups each month do outreach together, and that's really the heart of who we are. So it's really the best thing we do. You really should come check it out. But we're glad you're here. Table Community, you are sent.
I'm at all time. So I say wrong. Yeah, that's right. There's like, it was funny.
Then we also like airport signs. There's like vineyard signs. All these other things are
and I was like, okay, I'm from. It's like when me too, I'm always like, they're not unless you really are.
What do I do?
Right, exactly. It's like weird, it's like Taylor's, it's like
Bring her on back. We got a little
Oh my gosh. Takes her a minute. Oh yeah. You need new diapers. Feels like you need new diapers. Let's go change your diaper.
He's really good on bananas.
Yeah, I love it.
He follows social media, he does a lot of more videos, it's crazy. That's why we live in I tried to do like, I wasn't big, I just like riding, would go like riding, skate parks up and stuff, and learn how to drop it.
That one,
That's what I got out of it. I stopped for so long having other stuff.
probably not. I know. When I was maybe not. Right. When they were like kids, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm 25, so.
I'm so honored to
Travel, just like basically trying to get away.
I don't know where, but I know him. I thought it was through Pastor Owen because he picked up in about Brooklyn, and I was like, and so I thought that was it. And then we kind of like, we did the same thing on Facebook. Like, Stacey Ross, not Stacey Shelby.